Okay, so can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So welcome everybody to the session. This is our second session of the year. So I'm very happy to have you all here. Sorry, some more people. I'm very happy to see you all here, and we are very excited for the session because it's the first one of the year that we're having someone from the industry that is going to show us how we can apply all the tools that we see on our conferences, all these tools that you see academically, and how that is perceived and how that is used in the industry. So I want to welcome Henrique Carretti. I don't know in which language I'm going to pronounce their name, but Henrique Carretti. Henrique, he holds a MIT Master's in Supply Chain Management from the MIT from the 2020, and he's a naval engineer from the University of São Paulo. He has over a decade of experience driving strategic transformation across the entire supply chain value chain, and he works as a global supply chain consultant with a pedigree, proven track record delivering high-impact global projects across Brazil, Germany, the US, Mexico, and for Fortune 500 companies. He has 5 year experience in Latin America's largest e-commerce ecosystem, currently product head network design and integrated capacity planning at Mercado Libre in Brazil. And his core expertise is to bridge the gap between technological supply chain solutions and business needs. So today, Henrique is going to show us and share with us some of his experience. I hope you all enjoy the session. Welcome, Felipe. Thank you for your time. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Agatha. You all can see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Amazing. So on today's talk, I want to start over a bit different. And I want you to take a minute to think about the year of 2019 and reflect on the plan you had for done for the 2020 year, right? I mean, you probably had everything figured out, how much you were gonna sell, what inventory you needed to build, how much you're gonna produce, your 3PL contracts. But all of a sudden, we had a surprise from Wuhan, and the global pandemic hits, right? So all that all beautiful plan that we all supply chain professionals love so much, you need to throw at the garbage and start everything over. You might have the feeling that these sorts of events are becoming more common. And on today's talk, we want to explain how my view on how we supply chain professionals should adapt the way we plan in order to adapt to this more dynamic world, right? So, and at the end, we will show two use cases here. We are applying at Mercado Libre, one in the S&OP environment and the other one in the network design. So, to start over, for decades, the supply chain discipline was governed by principles of, let's say, stability, forecastability, and linear optimization. It's like we saw the way business operated as the series of interconnected gears, and the key job and the key responsibility of us supply chain professionals was to adjust these gears in order for the figure of a perfect machine to work well, right? So we have the suppliers, the manufacturers, the distributors, and we were always fine tuning the dynamics between these players, but in a sort of stable system. This works well and brings this efficiency in a system that does not change all the time. However, our world, as I was mentioned at the beginning, is much more volatile. There is even an acronym for that that stands for a more volatile, uncertain, complexity, and ambiguous world. Right now, we are seeing Iran war, China blockades, fluctuation on oil prices, capacity constraints, inflation in the US, all sorts of events that really disrupt the way our supply chains are designed. And we need to change the way we approach overall planning in order for our companies to be more adapted to this new world. And this is the key focus of our presentation today. So, to say how we want to change, we need to start from where we were before, right? So typically, the planning process on a company, yeah, a retailer or a e-commerce, would start over looking through our historical data, some sort of statistical analysis that you are all familiar with. We build our forecasts, trying to extrapolate patterns from the past. And from that, you build some sort of static planning, how much you want to produce, how much inventory you want to build. You would bring that to a table that make a decision, and then you try to execute this plan. The sort of episodic planning process, either monthly, quarterly, or weekly, will take place. And any time that some sort of disruption happen, your entire company enters in firefighting mode, right? So you are not prepared for that, and then you have all the war rooms, and you are trying to react to these new conditions that you have not anticipated. However, your tools do not accompany this process, right? You can't really drive a strategic decision with the new conditions you have placed in the time you need to. So the way we see the planning process changing in this new dynamic world, where this sort of events is much more common, is instead of a episodic linear sequence of events, much more a loop type of planning, where you start from the data, you capture, you extract it. Today we have all sorts of systems that allow us to have really large amounts of data. Then you need to structure this data uh, after cleaning and make relations between them. You build that into a model, you run simulations, you build all sorts of scenarios, and with that, you go to the decision-making process. But you do not stop over there. After you have the decision, you need to start over and see what is changing, because you might need to adjust the decision you did before. So the way we structured today's presentation, we are gonna deep dive a little bit on each of the parts of this planning cycle. And well, as I mentioned, at the end, we see two use cases. So everything starts with data, right? The problem is that today, I saw a lot of that during my consulting time. Most companies are really rich on data, but quite poor on wisdom, because raw data itself is just a series of terabytes, and it's actually a cost to the company. When you process, you clean, and you organize this data, you have an asset. But to really take value from that asset, you need to simulate this data and build scenarios. That's when you have the superpower. But everything starts with data. There is a report. I believe most of you are familiar with the MIT Cave Lab. One of its reporters mentioned that the biggest barrier for companies to implement successful simulation and optimization projects is not actually the build or the running of the models itself, but the availability of good quality data. Uh, you probably are familiar with that scenario where you go to your sales CRM software, you have a certain demand forecasting number, and if you talk to the head of that area, he says, no, this is our number. And then you go to the S&OP team and they have a different number in the Excel. And at the end, at the production floor, they are seeing a different forecast. This is quite common, even in companies that have ERPs, this leaving of parallel data sets that every area builds. And it's really important, if you are in this type of scenario, to start by organizing a single source of truth. Uh, I know it's cliche, garbage in, garbage out, but I cannot emphasize that much because typically you need to spend a large amount of time in resources organizing this data set. Well, let's assume you have the raw data, you have a single source of truth. Can you work with the raw data from the sensors itself or from your shipments backlog? Not quite, right? To put that into a model, you need to transform this data, adjust the level of granularity. And here, I just want to place a warning. There is a good paper of Sam Savage. He's from MIT as well, and he mentions the flaw of average. And he has a very good visualization. I mean, you should not cross a river that is on average 1 meter depth, right? You gotta watch out to those 3 meter rows inside the river. And the same applies for your plans. Really be careful on averaging out every aspect of your operation. Plan based on average are on average wrong. Of course, you need to aggregate your data, but really take a moment to think on what level of granularity you are going to bring your data to, and make sure you are not averaging out the dynamics you want to have. Well, so we have the data. We did not average everything out. I want to go to the model part of the thing, but I need to place another warning before going to that, which is I see a lot of companies saying, I have a lot of intelligence in my business. Here are my gazillion dashboards that are showing all sorts of heat maps and waterfalls and scatter plots. Well, business intelligence, dashboards, KPIs, they are very good for understanding how your business is performing. Looking through the rear view mirror of your car, for instance, and understanding if there is something you are doing wrong and you might need to change. But they are only meant to this retrospective view and here really high level strategic planning. Operational intelligence, on the other hand, is like an analogy to look through the windshield of your car, right? You are trying to foresee what's coming next and where you need to steer your gear in order for you to go in the right course. So I wanted to make this parallel because I think it's very important. Do not have the feeling that only because you have a lot of dashboards you are all set. They are important. They let you understand how your performance and value this performance, the good players and the bad players. But it's really important to not stop there and go to the next step. Well, so we have the data, we have the dashboards, but we need to build the models. At essence, it's not an academic lecture, as Agatha mentioned, but at essence, we could say that every model is a way we are trying to represent a reality in a mathematical representation, right? And it's really important we understand the different types of models and what they are used for. So there are three classes of model, we could say, or three ways of grouping those models. The first one is focused on the what happened part of your business, right? All that BI word that we were mentioned, they are useful for building out your visualization models, your KPI reports, really good for diagnostics, but they stop there. They stop on the what happened part. The next step is you trying to foresee what will happen. And on this class of models, you have all the demand forecasting, for instance, where you could either have statistical models or machine learning processes that are really hyped right now. And they are basically a way of trying to identify patterns in the past and understand how those patterns of the past might be reproduced in the future. And then you go to the third classes of models that, in my opinion, are the most relevant for supply chain professionals, and they deal with the what should we do part of our business, right? This is where basically optimization and simulation resides. They applying them might suggest you courses of action to achieve specific goals. So, what's the difference between optimization and simulation? Uh, Without getting too technical, I could say that basically optimization tries to find the best, right? So it's just a smart way of going through your solution space and not having to test every possibility and identify that one solutions that is better for your objective. So the classical example, right? What's the shortest path between points A to B? Really powerful for all vehicle routing problems and also for network design. But the problem with optimization is that typically it's designed for you to suggest a single solution, right? Whereas simulation is a way of a model trying to mimic reality. So we input all sorts of conditions. It's really powerful for us to uh, input probabilistic variables such as, I don't know, what's the probability of having a rain, and with that having a traffic congestion, an accident delay, might strikes of our drivers, and all sort of chaotic scenarios that have a probability. But with simulation, we can simulate all those scenarios and have a more robust solution. So also they can be used combined. It's quite common for you to simulate scenarios and then get those condition scenarios and apply optimization over that. Here at Mercado Libre, you might be glad to hear that we have a team of over 100 scientists with masters, PhDs. They are the ones that are the brains behind all those models of operational research and simulation. And they are part typically of squads that are consisted of key business owners, a product figure, and the UX team trying to build those solutions. And today, almost every part of our supply chain solutions have a some sort of optimization or simulation embedded. So we have the models, we have the data, we have the model, then we get to simulation part of the problem, right? So we have a few types of simulations. This is not an exhaustive list, but I wanted to conceptualize those. The discrete event simulation, it's the, let's say, basic one, the bread and butter of all classes of simulation models. Uh, it's basically a way of seeing a system as a series of chronological events. It's like your clock jumps from one event to the other, and this event could be, for example, the arrival of orders in a warehouse, right? So you can model what process each of your items, depending on the characteristics of it, need to pass through the warehouse, and it's really powerful for all this internal logistics and warehouse design. It's also applied for identifying bottlenecks in your network and all sorts of other uh, use cases where you need to represent your reality through the series of chronological events. Then also from MIT, there is even a class about system dynamics where it's a way of modeling your systems through flows, stocks, and feedback loops that could be either reinforcing or balancing loops. And it's really good to model macro dynamics. I remember during the pandemic, there was really nice models about how the virus was going to spread throughout the populations and how vaccines should be distributed in order to stop that spread. So if you have complex macro dynamics that you want to have a module, system dynamics might be a good use case for you. And most recently, there is this new approach called agent-based modeling. And basically, it's a series of autonomous agents that interact with one other. But I said I do not want to get too technical. What I do want to emphasize is that as its core, even the most advanced simulation software is just a good calculator. I mean, uh, there is an analogy. Most of you might have done some sort of calculus during university. You are not going to perform better just because you have the latest HPP model at your hand, right? It's really, you need to choose between studying or buying a new equipment. You should probably prioritize studying. So, of course, the tool is important, but I do believe that the planner's intuition will always play a vital role during all these models because they are the ones that have the sensitivity, understand the business, and uh, know what types of scenarios should be modeled. So here an example, right? Let's say we anticipate some sort of delay due to a shortage of capacity of containers from our Chinese suppliers. Well, as me as a planner, right, what I need to do is to translate that into my simulation model, build that scenarios, and then take that to the decision table where a course of action will be decided with the scenarios that I did. But the model itself will not do that for me. So I really want to emphasize that. Do not think that only because you have the technological stack, your problems are solved. You should really invest in your team and on the capability of translating that business knowledge and intuition into scenarios and your modeling process. So we have the data, we have the models. Uh, we have the simulated scenarios. What's next? Are we randomly simulating scenarios? That's not how you operate a business, right? So it's typical for companies to structure its planning process in cycles. I believe that's a good practice. And the typical types of cycles we have are the strategical, the tactical, and the operational. We can see a planning cycle as just a way of segmenting our future into time buckets, and each of our cycles should be adjusted to the types of decisions I'm trying to make on that cycle and the lead time required to actually trigger them. So, for example, in a strategical cycle that I'm looking through a 1, maybe 2 to 5 years time frame, I'm making really uh, strategic decisions as the opening of a new factory or a new distribution center, or maybe the outsourcing of my operations. So these are the type of decisions that require a big lead time for making happen, because typically involve large capex or coordination of multiple areas for the initiative to take part. So on this type of strategical scenarios, the models, they are used more in a decision support way. What I mean by that is that you do not need a really large level of automation for the decision making. We have some sort of time, and the modeling is used basically for us to build all those scenarios and bring that to a table where we recommend a sort course of action, right? So this is the strategical size. At the middle, between the operational and the strategical, we have the tactical layer. Here is typically where the S&OP team people lives. Here we are making decisions that require some sort of preparation, not as much as the strategical ones, such as, I don't know, how much inventory we are going to build for our peak season, for our Christmas seasons, right? So here we are quite in the middle. So you want to have some sort of automation, but it's really not necessary to have a completely autonomous process. You can still have human intervention uh, and some sort of decision table going on to align your stakeholders. At the bottom, we have your operational level that could goes from hours, what I'm going to do the next shift today, to 2 to 3 weeks. So here it's really the fast decisions that you need to be doing. Here you want to have a stack of technological solutions that are really automated. Here there is a lot of potential for AI agents and all sorts of automations that you want to bring. Here is the place to make that happen. Of course, it's not, you cannot prioritize one sort of cycle, right? If you made bad strategical decisions, you are doomed to those decisions in your tactical cycle and you suffer on the operation. So you should really want your company to evolve in a similar pace in all sorts of horizons. So you have a more robust supply chain going on. So I believe with that we ended the cycle. So we have a good quality data. We did not average out every single aspect of our data set. We know what model we want to build, either simulation or optimization. We know how we want to create our scenarios. We can use a discrete event simulation, and then we adapt all that solution into a decision-making process that is aligned with the cycle, adjusting the level of automation we want to have. So this is all the theory. How will we bring that into practice? As I mentioned to you, we have models going on in all types of layers. I brought two examples that I worked closer to, but feel free to reach out if you want to get more details and insights. So the first use case, I want to focus on the middle layer, the tactical decisions. So we had a problem here at Mercado Libre. We needed to plan the capacity of our nodes. So the typical network structure of an e-commerce will consist of a fulfillment center, is where we have our inventory from our sellers or 1P. You have your cross docks, places where you deconsolidate the cargo, and you have your last mile nodes, and all the arts, all the ground and air transportation that connect those nodes. To operate those nodes and arts, you need to have a capacity. How many people you want to hire? What's the capacity of your sorter? How many inventory space you need to have? And to make these decisions, we have planning cycles, and we need a demand. We need a forecast of how much is going to be sold from this specific fulfillment center. And how we started this process a lot of years ago was basically reproducing what was available in the industry and the experience from the professionals that were here, which is look at the historical data, do some sort of statistical forecasting with machine learning or a statistical one, and with this demand planning of each node and each arch, trying to determine what the capacity was required. But we were really looking through the system as isolated silos, right? So I would look into the history of vendors of sales from the fulfillment center and translate that into a forecast of that fulfillment center. That worked for some time, while still our company had a small network. However, there are a few problems with this approach. The first one is that our history is dirty, right? And what I mean by dirty is not only problems of capturing data, but actually all sorts of events that happen in the past and will not necessarily happen in the future. And when I'm applying those models, I might get some sort of noise from this data and reproduce an event that should not be represented. For instance, we can say a strike of drivers or the shortage of capacity in a specific node because your works didn't appear to the shift, or a specific campaign that happened during a reality show. So all those type of events and the combined effect of those really brings noise into your data, and it's hard to clean. When we apply these statistical models into this data, we reproduce these patterns we do not want to. So this is one problem. Let's assume for a second that we are very good and we can clean out all that noise. So is still good to apply the statistical approach into the historical data? Not as well, because our network is constantly changing. Luckily, we are expanding a lot. We're constantly opening new fulfillment centers, cross-dock, and last mile nodes. And that is good because it's a show that the business is health. But it really imposes a challenge into the demand planning part, because every time you put a new node into your network, the way your packages flow throughout the network changes. So if you are only looking at the history, you do not have the history of a new fulfillment center. So it's really challenging to only focus on a statistical approach and historical data in some sort of this type of dynamic environment we live on here at Mercado Libre. So what pains we had at that moment? Basically, capacity misalignment issues. So you had more capacity in the fulfillment than you have in the last mile nodes, for example. Underutilization of the assets. And when you have the saturation of your network, you actually have a deterioration of the delivery promise. So it was really difficult for us to scale our operations. So we changed from this initial state of sealed planning in historic centric models to a new project that looked at our network as a integrated view. So there was this initiative that involved both technological, S&OP, and operational teams, where we transformed our operation and our way of planning, not only using historical data in statistical models, but also putting in the business knowledge, the things that we knew were going to change, such as, I don't know, changes of tariffs for sellers, to take one example into account, and the design of the future network, as I mentioned, that is done in a network design in a higher layer of the planning process. Build that together with the historical data and feed that to a mix of optimization and simulation models. With this approach and looking to the network as an end-to-end system, where one package that enters in the beginning needs necessarily to be dispatched at the end, we are able to really increase the accuracy of our demand planning. But I would say that most important than increasing the accuracy of the demand is the ability that we developed of creating these sort of what if scenarios, right? So what if there is a capacity shortage on my cross docks? What if the buyer behavior changes and now they start ordering more of our flexible delivery method option? So all these sorts of this capability of testing this what if made our entire planning process much more robust and significantly reduced the idle capacity and shortage problems that we had at our network. So this was a really large initiative. And the second example I would like to bring today is on the network design layer. This is a typical problem. All of us supply chain professionals are familiar with it. We need to decide how many fulfillment centers we're going to open, what's the location, the capacity, and the number of these fulfillment centers. And this is a really complex problem. The solution space is huge. We have here a representation of that solution space. We need to balance transportation costs with speed in conversion, because the closer you are to your buyer, the better the promise you have, and consequently, the higher the sales and your conversion rate is. And also, and I think this is the most complicated part of this problem for e-commerce, the inventory constraints. Here, the majority of inventory is 3P, so it's really uh, important for us to correctly model what's my ability to build the necessary inventory to be able to feed all these new nodes that I'm opening. Because otherwise, I'm opening a node and I do not have the items to put on that node, and I will generate a lot of shipments from non-optimal facilities, and my cost can increase a lot. So how we attacked this problem? A few years ago, we went through the path of trying to solve everything with optimization. I think it's one of the most classical approach, optimization for network design. And what we realized is that optimization is good, but just the optimal is not enough for us to really build trust on the solution. We needed to be able to simulate the scenarios, test the sensitivity of the solution, and really bring the stakeholder into the creation process. So all that what if scenarios that I was mentioned, they are hard to achieve if you only have an optimization solution. So right now we build a combination of solutions internally where the user can seemingly swift from scenarios that he wanna test by himself with the intuition that appeared in one meeting, the suggestion of optimal scenarios, and also the possibility to use simulation to massively generate a large amount of scenarios and analyze the combination and bring that to that decision table where our roadmap is designed. So this is really in line with what other e-commerce players are doing, and we are really uh, inspired by this journey. Here, our inspiration is also the MIT Cave Lab. So, if you are not familiar with it and you are interested in the topic of a network design, I really suggest you to take a look at YouTube, because uh, really the key problem in the industry when we are talking about network design it's not the model itself. The key problem is for you to build the trust on the stakeholder and to explain that to someone that is not familiar with all that sort of complicated analytics. So, building dashboards, building interactive environments where you can bring the stakeholders into the design process really increase the trust of the entire area, and you can build the sense of, okay, we all believe this is the best plan, let's go together. So I really emphasize the importance of that, and I believe it was a really good decision to build this lab at MIT. So I believe that wraps up. I will leave some time for questions that you probably have, but I wanted to end with a final message that we talked today a lot about technology, but I want to emphasize that it's not the software itself that will change your business. You will. The tools are only powerful when the hand that guides us knows what they are doing. So, what I invite you to do, the ones working with planning, is next time you go to your office, do not question what the forecast accuracy is. question how many scenarios were simulated, because really what is important in this new world is your ability to react to the changes that appear. So be the pilots of this change and let's get to work. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Henrique. Thank you for all your experience and the nice case that you show us. So I'm just gonna open the floor for all the attendants here. I don't know if you have any question, any comments. If you want, you can write it down. You can raise your hand or just open your mic and ask your question. No questions yet? Well, just to break the ice, I have one question that I was thinking, and that's something that I always hear, mostly here in Bolivia. I live in Bolivia, like I was telling you, that people say, yeah, but I don't have the money, to invest on such structures. I don't know how to use that. I don't have the people. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the tools. And of course, that is very intimidating for many companies to try to understand the importance of those tools. Of course, you're talking about Mercado Libre. It's a huge company. It had a even larger boom during the pandemics, like you stated at the beginning. And we have other companies that are in the same line. But what would be your approach, thinking on how smaller companies or startups even could start working better with their data? And like you said, not ending up with a lot of dashboards very nicely done, but they're not useful, right? So because that's what people think. Sometimes they think, yeah, I just have
Yeah.
this structure. I have a lot of things showing here, but I don't know what to do with them. So what do you think should be the approach?
While you was talking, I remember every time you go into the transportation, you want to have a screen with all the trucks because that looks nice, but you can't actually do anything with that screen, right? So I would say that's one of the professors from MIT always emphasizing in his classes. Really focus on what you're trying to solve first. It's not, I mean, there are a lot of software companies out there with really good sales people, and they will say, here, our software will solve your entire supply chain. And I really think that's not the case. So if you need to invest, even if you're a small company, focus on having good supply chain professionals that can really understand your problem, phrase that problem. And right now, I believe we are living a disruption phase with all the AI. It's really possible to build things with small amounts of resources. The build of software itself, I would say, is becoming more of a commodity, and having the code, but understanding the business and what you need to solve that's where the real value is. So I would say try to focus on the three key problems you see at the operation, invest on your supply chain professionals, and with that on mind, explore AI, because that is really a path where you can have impact solutions with small amounts of investment.
Yeah, that's something that we need to change the mindset of people, of course, of the decision-making process in companies. Thank you. So we have two questions. I'm gonna go first with Fabricio, who is raising his hand. Fabricio, you can go ahead.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Henrique, for the presentation. I had one question for your case one, where you mentioned about the new end-to-end planning and so on. I was wondering, did it bring some challenges in terms of speed of the model itself, right? Because now you have everything interconnected, or can you still be fast? Or, I mean, maybe you can just share some thoughts on that, because when you had an isolated planning is probably easier, right? Than when you connect everything and something changes. And well, how do you deal with that new complexity, right?
Yeah, right on the spot, Fabrizio. That was indeed a challenge. Maybe if I had some of the operations research guys here, they could could explore a little bit the technical part of the solution. But what I would say is that what was the key decision that we made in order to be able to do this integrated planning was when I was mentioning the adjusting of level of granularity of your data, right? If you try to model all the shipments from the future and build a digital twin when you are creating every single shipment of the future in its most capillary level of granularity, it will be really, really hard. But we focus on aggregating the data in order to reflect the dynamics that we knew were the biggest issues. That connects with the answer I gave to Agatha before. So with this aggregation, it's possible to still reflect the key dynamics of the network without having to expend an enormous amount of computational power. But it was a lot of work and going back to the whiteboard because the problem gets too big and always looping and interacting to achieve the best solution.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So we have a lot of questions here in the chat. Rafael is asking, when you talk about scenario planning and strategic planning, how many scenarios are you typically dealing with?
Wow, that will depend on the reality of each company. I would say here we are talking about thousands of scenarios, but what I could say is that first, try to understand what are the big things that we're going to change. There is one thing is that, well, I have some sort of uncertainty between amongst the inventory part of my business. To take one example, now I'm not sure 5 years from now what will be my ability to bring inventory in. So this is one of the dynamics I need to be module, and then you can have like a machine to generate all the scenarios for you, but then you need to aggregate those scenarios and interpret that. So there are parts of the scenario generations that can be automated when you're just doing some sort of sensitivity, but the key dynamics that you want to test, for example, if inventory is or not or is not an issue, you need to do that with your stakeholders and your planner's intuition. So it's not possible to simulate every scenario, right? So you need to bring that intuition into the table.
Perfect, thank you. So I have here a question from Andres. He's saying Mercado Libre sells a lot of products via drop shipping. And is this kind of inventory included or considered in your models? And here he complements, how do you consider the variability of such vendors in drop shipping?
Typically, when we are doing the design of the network, we kind of segregate them. So it's not, we have the fulfillment models and the cross-dock models with the drop shipping. We are now working towards the unification inside a single model, but right now we try to solve that problem with two separate, because we can like assume what share of our sellers in 5 years from now will be using drop shipping and fulfillment. So it's really not ultra necessary to have a single model to solve both scenarios together. But and regarding the variability, scenario generation, right? We of course there are discussions going on in stochastical optimization as well, but I would say it's still a bit far from the level of maturity we are at, and we really can solve the problem generating a lot of scenarios.
Thank you. Andres, go ahead.
No, that was it. That was it. Just listen to pay attention to the answer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andres. So last question, for the sake of time, is gonna be our last. Thank you, Henrique, for all the answers. Carlos says, looking back at the integration of machine learning to our CPFR collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment workflow, what do you think we could have done differently to better align our cross-functional teams with the new automated forecasts?
Rafael, just to clarify, you are mentioning what we could have done different in Mercado Libre. I didn't understand if it's at your company or Meli.
It's Carlos Andres. I think he's not in the room right now. I think he must have has some issues. Yeah, I think something happened with his connection because he wrote it, but he's not in the room right now. So we don't know.
Yeah, let's wait to see if he returns. Otherwise, I can chat with him and clarify.
Perfect. So we just leave that on. Yeah, because it seems very personal, the question. Very.
Yeah, I think you need to bring the case up so we can discuss it.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have all the questions. Actually, you're like right over the time, and we still have some other comments that we want to share with our participants. So thank you so much, Enrique, for your participation. It was very enriching. It is very nice to see how everything that we are doing in the academia can be applied and how that can be useful in the industry. And I think that you're a very nice example of that. So thank you for sharing your experience. And well, hopefully we can, share other experiences and do other activities. So thank you so much. And I'm gonna give the floor to Edgar Gutierrez, who's our president of the POMS LAC chapter. He's gonna share some other thoughts with you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Agatha. Thank you, Enrique. Was a wonderful presentation. I love it. I love all that you shared with us. Thank you so much. We know Mercado Libre is one of the biggest companies in Latin America, and it's great. Do a very good job. So, Enrique, thank you for your time. Wait for the picture. 4 minutes. I will talk a little bit about our chapter. So I will share my screen. Let me see here. All right. So let's talk a little bit about our chapter. So probably most of you already know about it, but if not, let me tell you what we are doing and what we will do. What is our next conference? So for those of you are the first time here, the POMS Latin American Caribbean chapter is part of the Production and Operation Management Society. This is one of the biggest societies on the world in operation management. Everything that it is with logistics, supply chain, all the operation management that Ricky was talking today, it is one all those academics and industry practitioners are meeting. So we have 3 main objectives. First, encourage the exchange of ideas, experiences, and knowledge. That's why we are doing this. Forum for communication and knowledge sharing, and promote the interest in the field of POM, right? All the production and operation management. So despite being the LHC chapter, we have members from all over the world. That's one of the great things that we have. We are very proud about it. All right, this is our chapter. Most of you already saw. Today we have with Agatha, with Carlos, but in general, we have our regional vice president of Americans, Professor Trisel Carnacion, me acting as a president, Edgar Gutierrez Franco. Agatha is our vice president, recently elected. We have Carlos here also as our treasurer, Professor Carla Tejada, our VP Communication, and Professor Sofia Perez, our secretary. So you will have the opportunity to meet with them. Follow us in our social networks. So our recent activities, all with webinars, workshop, master classes. Go to YouTube, follow us. You can find everything over there. This recording will be there. So if you miss any part, don't worry, it will be there. Enrique will have all the opportunity to share with us. So our recent activities, we have our last conference in Cartagena, Colombia. That was in 2024. You can find most of the information on the web. That was joined with MIT. That was the Scale LAC conference in 2024. What is next? This year, this will be our next conference. Will be in Panama. That is called Production Operation Management for Resilient and Sustainable Work. So hopefully you guys can go there. We can meet Panama. It's a wonderful and amazing place. All the logistics that you imagine is over there. The dates will be from November 17 to 20 and will be in that hotel. So as you guys can see in this part. How to join us? Very easy and cheap. So just go to POMS.org and /membership. You can see we have for Latin American Caribbean chapter is $5. So it's nothing. You will have access to a lot of information. All members can participate for free of the virtual events, the POMS LAC chapter board and organizers. All members get discounts to the annual POMS LAC conference. So if you are planning to go to Panama, you will have a discount. All right. What else do you want to see? Please scan the QR. What are your topics of interest? What other events would you like to see? And how can improve our chapter? Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Let me see if we have everything. So for all of you that want to open your camera, let's go for a quick picture. And again, Enrique, thank you so much for being here with us. That was a wonderful loved talk. I enjoyed a lot. All right,
Thank
so
you.
let's take the picture for people that are here. Agatha, can you take it over there?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so
Wonderful. I see some of my students here. I'm so happy. My colleagues and people around the world. I'm very happy that you guys are here. All right.
it's
So
fine.
you take it?
Yeah, but you moved.
All right. Hey,
Okay, again.
wonderful.
Great.
Perfect.
There
Thank
you
you so much, Enrique. Thank you, everyone. 8:59 in Colombia. We are very punctual. Thank you so much and have a great, great day. And enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.